Our next speaker is the Southampton Port Director from ABP, Alastair Welch. But he started not ruling the waves, but looking to the sky, because he spent most of his career in the aviation industry with a degree in mechanical engineering and accountancy expertise. He's been supporting airlines and airports worldwide, formulating strategy, and he's here to help with the strategy for the new Freeport. So, our next speaker, Alastair Welch, ladies and gentlemen.
It's rather worrying when you run up on stage and everyone runs away, but never mind, we'll see. And given the airport connection and your James Bond comment, my useless bit of trivia for the morning is the James Bond relevance, of course, is the first application of in-car satellite navigation. Southend Airport was the destination of the first application when James Bond was taking his Aston Martin there. There you go. We'll test you on that one day and see when you use it. So first things first, let's see if that clicker... So Brian's clicker wasn't working, so I'll be given another one. So we'll say, next slide, please. Another political reference, I think, Peter, but there we go. So from my point of view, Brian's told you lots about the Freeportian principle. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thanks. And from my point of view, I was going to try to just bring it to life, first in the context of Southampton, but then the context of the wider Solent, and then really try to bring to life what this actually means, certainly for us as an organisation, but also for the various partners involved with the Solent Freeport, and I hope, therefore, by extension, to everyone who's involved with the region economically and from an employment point of view, or from a wider environmental point of view, or what have you. So, a picture here just trying to give a flavour of looking from Southampton down the water towards the Isle of Wight. This is simply one section of the Freeport, but it summarises the head, if you like, the top end of the waterside tax site, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But if you go to the next slide, please. The Port of Southampton, to give you a flavour, Peter trails some of this, but so we are locally, yes, certainly one of the UK gateway ports, no question about that. Yes, we are the UK's biggest export port. Lots of big numbers, but the ones that for me are interesting. £40 billion worth of goods we export from the port every year, manufactured goods. And if ever you have a chance to wander through the port, and you're allowed to, the range of manufactured stuff that we do still make in the UK truly is staggering. But over 90% of what we export from here goes outside the EU. And that has real relevance in terms of our geography, and back to that in a moment. Yes, we have about 2 million TEU, that's 20-foot equivalent units, so that's probably about 1 million boxes, because most boxes now are 40-foot roughly. But 2 million boxes, TEUs that come through the port every year, and 80% of those come from the Far East. Bear in mind, in the UK, almost all container trade is boxes come in laden and they leave full of fresh air. We import manufactured goods from the Far East, and 80% of what we have here in the port comes in from the Far East, and roughly a third of the boxes come and go from the port by rail. But in terms of containers, there are 3 significant container ports in the UK, Felixstowe, us and London Gateway. And we are in a very competitive race with those, and that's an import story. In terms of cruise, as Peter mentioned, we are Europe's biggest cruise turnaround port. During the COVID pandemic, we were the port in the world. Let's be clear, we were the only port in the world that was able to receive and process and manage passengers and crew, and to vaccinate them and inoculate them and get them going. We were leading the way for the world in terms of cruise, and we should be very proud of what we did as a region and with the NHS and everyone else. A really, really positive thing, and that happened through collaboration. And it's partly because of that that we're in a very strong position and able to restart quickly when the rules started to change. So a very good story here, and because of that we are seeing ourselves coming out quickly from the pandemic in terms of cruise. Not out of the woods yet. I know Sanders here somewhere, and he's aged a couple of years, I think, in the last week. But generally speaking, we are absolutely on an improving place going forwards. And cruise has a huge value to our local economy. As well as that, more locally, of course, we and Portsmouth have a real role to play in connecting with the Isle of Wight, as does the New Forest, with a very fine connection from across through Yarmouth and so on. But in terms of the numbers, the jobs which ultimately are why businesses exist, we support realistically 15,000 plus jobs regionally and over 45,000 nationally. You talk to JCB, you talk to Caterpillar in Northumberland, you talk to Jaguar Land Rover in Solihull, you talk to Malahan aircraft support manufacturers in Northern Ireland, 90% of what they make comes here for export around the world, because this is how you connect with the world. And it's a really important piece that we shouldn't lose and shouldn't forget. But just talking a bit more about the pressures that we face locally, and then on to why the Freeport's so important. Next slide, please. So yes, we are, for sure, the home of the UK cruise sector, and we are seeing cruise ships getting bigger and bigger all the time. And the only way we can compete effectively, and to be clear, our competition for the large cruise ships, it's with Miami, it's with Fort Lauderdale, it's with the Gold Coast in Australia, it's with Barcelona and so on. Yes, there are other ports in the UK that supports cruise, and that's great, but the large cruise ships, the ones in manufacture now, we want to make sure that we are where they can operate and where they can grow. And so this terminal here is a great example of what we are doing and how we are investing to make sure we are ready for the new generation of cruise ships in operation now and which are increasingly coming in the future. And it's, I think, a testament to the long-term planning that the cruise industry is seeing and also our shareholders are supporting, that sees, yes, this terminal in place, but also in the Eastern Dock, our ocean terminal, which is home to Iona, which is a 6,000 plus passenger ship coming through every week. It really is testament to the investment that we're seeing that we can support that. The challenge that comes, though, of course, with ever larger ships is they need space. Buildings take up space close to quaysides, and then, of course, you need space for the coaches and the passengers and so on. And that is a real challenge when space ultimately becomes increasingly interesting. Next slide, please. Because whilst we know that cruise ships are getting bigger, container ships also aren't getting any smaller. Brian, understandably with pride, talks about his aircraft carriers, and he's got 2 aircraft carriers, which is very exciting. Very, very pleased for you, Brian. Whilst I wouldn't like to choose a fight with an aircraft carrier or what they carry, ships like this, so both of Brian's aircraft carriers could fit within the volume that one of these container ships develops. So these container ships truly are massive. I think the aircraft carrier is about 285 metres long. These are 400. They're wider, they're much taller. So these are truly huge. And the challenge going forwards, as these ships get ever bigger, they get, and bear in mind, what you see above the water, there's about 16 metres beneath the water as well on these ships. So they are truly enormous. And so we need to make sure we continue to invest, yes, in the marine infrastructure, but also in landside space to handle the boxes. Because one of these ships might handle 25,000 containers, but if you're taking 5,000 off and putting 5,000 off each time they come in, that means each ship coming through is 10,000 containers space you need to support it. And if you've got 4 ships in simultaneously, it gets quite challenging in terms of space. So the challenge for us is how do we find the space to support these ships, which are bringing products into the UK and supporting our manufacturing economy. On the next slide, we see just a little picture of one of our reasonably large ships coming around the corner. So historically, if you come through the port, you'll see the biggest container ships have been at the end of SCT5, our new biggest container berth. Well, because there are now so many of these large ships, we're now having to bring them around the side and taking them right up to Redbridge. And so we've now finished the work to invest on the quayside and in the water and around the water. And Steve, our harbour master, who's at the back over there, has managed to find a very cunning, clever way of meaning that we can magically get those ships around the corner so we have more capacity for more of the bigger ships in the world. And that's great, but again, space continues to be a challenge. Next slide. And we talk about cruise, we talk about containers, and we talk about automotive products and manufactured goods. We came to the point that we have so much space now being taken up with, yes, cruise, yes, containers and so on, and bulks as well, that the only way we could actually create more capacity was by going up. So we've got about 56,000 spaces, if you like, for automotive products in the port at the moment, and that's all basically full. So if you go around and see a compound or a car park empty, don't worry, it will have been full 48 hours ago, and be full in 48 hours' time. Today we've got 4 car ships in, I think, when I came through this morning. So we'll see around about 6,000 cars moving through the port today. And every single day we'll see this churn working through. So the numbers are scary, but the challenge for us is if we're going to keep the UK economy moving, we need to be able to operate effectively, but also we need the space to do that. So of our 56,000 spaces for automotive, around about half of them now are in multi-decks and about half at grade at ground level. And going forwards, we are going to find it, frankly, increasingly challenging ourselves to find the space. And the real challenge, I think, for the Freeport is how can we effectively develop our infrastructure locally and the land we have locally in a way that supports long-term growth for jobs and for the economy, but also UK manufacturing further afield. And if you go to the next slide, I try to give a flavour of what's going on. If you can see on this picture, Southampton being absolutely on the south coast in the UK, so the Solent, the Solent Freeport location absolutely is the first port of call as you come into Northern Europe for ships, and it's the last port on the way out of Northern Europe on your ships. So if you're a manufacturer in the UK and you want to get your goods to international markets, first, if your components, they come into the UK first, so you get them first, and if you make your goods, you get them out last, if you like, and so your working capital is reduced, but also you can get your goods to market much more quickly. So we are a real hub port, a bit like Heathrow has routes to many more places than the UK would justify because of the connectivity. We are the same with our automotive products. And the challenge for us is at the moment, because we have this hubbing effect, people will bring goods in to transfer them within the port, which then means we have more routes than otherwise would be the case. So if you're JCB, you can maybe get a service that goes to Baltimore, for argument's sake, 3 or 4 times a week from the port. So you get your product to market very, very frequently. If, in fact, we weren't able to be that hub because we ran out of space and we had to concentrate on a far fewer number of destinations, you might have to connect via somewhere like Zeebrugge or Bremerhaven or Cuxhaven to get your product to market. And that might more than double the cost of transporting it, and it might add 3 or 4 weeks to your transshipment or your shipment time. And for a business like JCB, that has a massive impact. So the challenge that we have locally is how can we take advantage of our location to support the long-term growth of, yes, the economy around here, but also across the wider UK. And that's really where the Freeport principle comes in, about how it can support long-term not only the economy locally, but also what can happen beyond that. So if we go to the next slide, please. In terms of the 3 fundamental government objectives for Freeports, and the team from Deluc are somewhere here, so they can correct me if any of this is wrong. But essentially, we see national hubs for global trade and investment. If you're at somewhere like Jebel Ali in Dubai, the principle is you bring in raw materials, you manufacture the goods, and you export them. That's the fundamental principle, and if you add value to a product, in that case Jebel Ali, and you're not taxing the product which is manufactured, if you like, on the site, so you are held harmless to certain taxes. Now, bit challenging for us because we don't have a huge amount of space locally for a Tesla-type manufacturing site, but we do have site which has access to the water, and that's where I think a lot of what we're trying to do will be interesting. But hubs for trade and investment, we do want to support regeneration and job creation. One of the challenges, we talk about Southampton and its City of Culture bid, one of the challenges is a lot of people simply don't get that in Hampshire, lovely leafy Hampshire, very pleasant, we know it's lovely. There are certain parts of Hampshire, if you spend too much time in Gosport, or you spend a lot of time in certain parts of the New Forest, or indeed in Southampton, you very quickly realise there are areas which really could do with support and help and improvement, and we want to support the regeneration of much of South Hampshire through what the Freeport's trying to do. And we also support very real innovation through the Freeports. And I think one thing that we often don't recognise is locally, whether it's in Southampton or in Portsmouth or the wider area, the amount of world-leading, cutting-edge innovation taking place, whether it's around oceanography, automated shipping and vessels and so on. There is a huge amount going on. A lot of it's below the radar at the moment, but as we increasingly start to talk about that, I think we'll become, I hope, increasingly proud of all the good work that is going on in that regard. But where we have freeports. From a government point of view, they are looking at custom sites and tax sites. Custom sites, frankly, are interesting, and they allow for people not to have to pay customs charges on goods until they've left the site. That has some benefits, but those benefits are limited for certain locations. But in the Freeport we're talking about, we have Portsmouth International Port, Portsmouth International Port, and we have Solent Gateway across the water, the old military port, which will be our main customs sites within the Freeport. And then tax sites. And we'll come on to the specific tax sites in a second. Ryan touched on them. But the principle of a tax site, for me, there's two things. One is, if you are looking to invest in infrastructure, invest in a facility, a factory or what have you, the intent is that you will get a number of benefits around not having to pay business rates for a short period, not having to pay certain national insurance charges and getting certain accelerated capital allowances and so on. That's all very interesting. I would suggest if you're predicating your business on a short-term tax break, then you might want to look very closely at your business case. But it's helpful and it might incentivize you to come here rather than go somewhere else. But the reality of what the tax sites really bring is in the longer term. Because whilst government has allocated £25 million of seed funding, which is early investment to support initial infrastructure across our region, and as the Freeport is confirmed in late summer, that's when the money is physically released, but we are doing work now as a Freeport to make sure we line those projects up, which will benefit from that investment as soon as we can in the autumn. And that will not change the world, but it'll be helpful and it'll kickstart a number of things we're trying to do across our sites. But the real prize, and this is for me the single biggest thing which has a benefit for everyone around the region, is if we get this right and we can see the investment across the sites, then after the 5 years for which there are no business rates, the following 25 years, the business rates which are received are retained by the local rating authorities for investment in the local area. And the principle is essentially is if we have the confidence in the Freeport locally, and we have the confidence that this is going to work, and the local authorities therefore are allowed to forward invest, knowing the money is going to come in the future. So this potentially unlocks 500 million of investment in infrastructure in the local area. So if we think about the principle, let's take the water side and the plans that we have to, if we go to the next slide, please. And if we just talk about, let's say we look at the various Freeport sites. So start at the bottom, and along the water side, Fawley Waterside, the old Fawley Power Station, major plans for investment in, yes, residential, but also commercial infrastructure. We think about the work that ExxonMobil are looking to do specifically around the new generation of power. So we're talking hydrogen and various variations on hydrogen. Some really exciting schemes there. They're a key tax site. The land that we have across the water, fundamental long-term for capacity, as well as Solent Gateway, the former military port across the water as well, and what's going on there. And we also have some site up by the container port here at Redbridge. All of these sites together have a very, very real role to play and have potential to grow. But critically, of those, 4 of those 5 I mentioned, so Fawley Waterside, the refinery, our land reserve, and the military port, all of those are fundamentally accessed by the A326, which as a road isn't good enough. And so one of the good examples of how the forward funding could make a real difference is for the rating authorities to agree for some of that money to go to support improvements to the A326, which the County Council has been planning for some time, to really make a difference and to kickstart the access to some of these sites to really move things forwards. And that's just one example of what I think will be a real practical illustration of how the Freeport will improve connectivity and transport infrastructure across the wider region for many people. So we get excited about what it can bring, not just for us, but also for the wider area. So that's the waterside cluster. There are 2 other tax sites to mention. One is the Dunsbury Park, which essentially is one which is a project in progress, and the intent is if people want to invest there going forwards, then again they get some benefits, but also the rates then are retained for investment from there. But also Navigator Quarter, which is essentially, as I look at it, the north-eastern corner of the airport linking across to the railway lines, and the potential there is there for investment in, I'll call it a business park, if I'm allowed to call it that, Steve. But the principle, again, is how we can make sure that we can deliver investment to create, yes, jobs, but also innovation, and ultimately help people to better connect with the rest of the world. So next slide. And if we talk about why it's then important to us, ultimately, selfishly, we see this potentially could give us increased port capacity across the area. Solent Gateway, the former military port across the water, they have consented plans to progress and develop their capacity for trade, and the Forley waterside also has strong planning permission in place for further development there. What we see long-term within the Solent Freeport, and these numbers are just for the waterfront, the waterside tax cluster, yet we see our ability to significantly grow our automotive capacity, our cruise capacity, and our container capacity. And these are the reasons why we think whether we can deliver more cruise, that'll support the local economy much stronger. We also believe that we can support the container activity, that supports UK access, and the automotive piece really supports the long-term ability of the UK to be in the automotive market. Critical 3 or 4 years for automotive now, lots of challenges today, but the electric vehicle phenomenon, which is going to hit us very, very hard very soon, if you haven't already experienced it, that is going to mean a real sea change in automotive trade. And if the UK, and it is an if the UK is able to deliver on electric vehicle or battery capacity in the UK, then we will have a very, very strong automotive industry for a very long term into the future. But the capacity that we think the Freeport can create is tremendous, not just for ABP, but across the business, across the tax sites. And that's really how it helps us, not only for ourselves, but also helps us to support the UK as the UK tries to trade in the future. Next slide. In terms of the economic outputs, the tax sites, we see 1.6 billion of private sector investment, and there's $1 billion plus already in the pipeline across the tax sites in the Freeport. So this is stuff which is not some sort of pipe dream. It's absolutely stuff which is it's planned, it's in place in terms of ready to go, and we just need to make sure that we can get on with this. And as the government confirmed things in September, or late summer, sorry the phrase, late summer, then we'll be able, hopefully, to really crack on. We talk about 32,000 jobs nationally. We talk about 3.5 billion of GVA. The numbers are always interesting, but the one for me that has the most resonance locally is, as I say, this 500 million of retained rates, which, if we think of it as a fund to invest in to support the future wealth of the area, and I think that's one which, if we steward it carefully and appropriately, can make a real difference for all of us. And next slide. But talking about a real difference to all of us, net zero, of course, is fundamentally something that goes hand in hand with the Freeport. If we are not in the position that we can support net zero, then we simply will not be able to progress things going forwards. So we want to make sure that everything we're doing is appropriate. We have a really special blue economy in terms of the maritime economy. The New Forest here, or the South Sounds National Park, some fantastic parts of green, if you like. And it's how we support economic development within the region that actually supports further improvement in those areas. Because there is a huge amount that we're doing well. The challenge is, how can we do it even better going forwards? Now, the pictures you see, if you can see on the top right, that's a picture of Bobby. Bobby Big Plugs, as he's known. So Bobby Big Plugs is deployed regularly now in the port to plug into the cruise ships. And Bobby, if we think about the amount of power a cruise ship will take, a cruise ship will take twice as much power as the whole of the rest of the port combined. And so the amount of effort that has to go into making sure that power is available is tremendous. And if we think about where we're trying to get to in 10, 20, 30 years' time, where shore power will become the norm, then the UK has some very serious questions to understand really how are we going to generate power on a scale that we need to support not just more shore power, but also electrification of cars and so on. So lots to do, but ultimately, Bobby it's a first commercial installation in the UK. We have now commissioned a whole host of ships that are based in Hamburg which claims to have shore power but doesn't seem to work. Don't quote me, please. But we are really proud that we've been able to deliver that shore power with the support of the Solent LEP. And it's something which we hope will be far from the last installation here. And we hope that Bobby will have a brother or a sister very soon to go up and down the quayside to supply power to ships. But overall, I think from my point of view, the opportunity we have here across the Solent area is to find a way to deliver the capacity the UK needs to improve our trade access to the world, because we are in the best possible location to trade with the world, but as well as supporting improved trade access, which helps the whole of the UK, that we use the sites that we have around the area, whether around the airport or Dunsbury Park, or right down the waterside from the old power station, the refinery, and the old military port, as well as some space that we have, to really see how we can grow our ability to support further employment, further innovation, but ultimately to deliver the income that we need for this fund, as I call it, to really support investment in the local area. If anyone thinks the government is going to look to South Hampshire in the near future for a huge amount of investment, when we have all sorts of pressures and the phrase levelling up, often referred to as north rather than economically, then we need to work really hard to get the investment locally. And the Freeport is one of the single biggest ways we'll be able to lever, ultimately, investment on the back of private sector investment to support infrastructure in the long term. So for me, big opportunity, yes, really exciting. This is not going to be easy, but we've done a lot of the hard work so far, and I think we're very well placed for growth in the future. So with the next slide, I think that's all I was going to say. And I think back to Peter. Oh, it's a Phil. There you go. I'll now sit down. Phil.